Hello everybody, I'm Lora Luquet from St. John the Baptist Parish Library. This video will be the second installment in my new series on Photoshop on the St. John Library YouTube channel. In my last video, I showed how to create a double exposure effect in Photoshop. This video, however, will serve as a beginner-friendly tutorial on the basics of the program. In this video, I will cover how to create a document in Photoshop, how to use the tools that they provide to you in the toolbar, and the purpose of layers. Before we begin, it's important to understand the difference between creating a new document in Photoshop and opening an existing image in Photoshop. When creating a new document, you are essentially creating a blank canvas to work on. This method is usually used by graphic designers or digital artists who want to use shapes and brushes to create a graphic or a drawing. You can choose the size of your canvas when creating a new document to be as big or as small as you need it to be. However, photographers usually start by opening an existing image into Photoshop in order to edit it. In this case, the image determines the size of the document. Let's start with creating a new document from the home screen. The way that you would do this is to launch Photoshop, and then you'll be on this page right here. You'll go to New File, and it'll open up the New Document dialog box. You can automatically, from the very beginning, set your file to be whatever you want. So I'm going to do example, and then you have all of these options that you can switch between. So you want to start with your width and your height. I like to use pixels because it's what I'm familiar with, but you can use inches if you want to. And you can pick the orientation, but the orientation isn't really going to matter much for what I'm going to do because I am just going to do a square. So I'm going to set it to be 1500 pixels by 1500 pixels. I usually leave the resolution as what it originally is set up as well as the color mode. You can pick the background color. You can have it be transparent. You can have it be transparent. You can set a custom color, black and white. Usually I'm going to go with white. I usually leave the color profile and the pixel aspect ratio. So from there, you'll just click Create. And as you can see, I have my white background square. Now for opening an existing image in Photoshop, there are two different ways that you can go about doing this. You can either drag and drop a file right here, or you can just click Open. I am going to click Open. It'll open this dialog box that allows you to open from the Creative Cloud. I don't have any files in my Creative Cloud, so instead I'm going to click this button right here that says On Your Computer. And then I'm going to go to my desktop and pick this image that I saved for this purpose. And it's just going to open it up. Now that we know how to create a new document or open a pre-existing image, I'm just going to stay in this image and talk about the toolbar in Photoshop. The toolbar is located over here to the left. And you can actually move it around to wherever you want it to go. And you can press these double arrows right here and make it 2 columns instead of 1. But I'm just going to leave it right here. So in the toolbar, we have the Move tool, the Rectangular Marquee tool, the Lasso tool, the Object Selection tool, the Crop tool, the Frame tool, the Eyedropper tool, the Spot Healing Brush tool, the brush, the clone stamp, the history brush, the eraser, the gradient, the blur, the dodge, the pen tool, horizontal type, path selection, rectangle, the hand tool, the zoom, and then you can edit your toolbar as well so that you can move stuff around. All of the tools that have this arrow in the corner of them actually have more tools attached to them that you can use. So if you right click on the tool, you can see the other tools that are related to them. So here we have the artboard tool. And then under eraser, there's a background eraser and magic eraser. If you look at the text, there's horizontal type, vertical type mask, and horizontal type mask, etc., etc. The tool that's initially displayed in each spot in the toolbar is known as the default tool. For example, the crop tool is the default tool for this spot in the toolbar. But Photoshop won't always display the default tool. Instead, it'll display the last tool that you used. So if I pick the perspective crop tool instead, that's what will show in the toolbar. So now I'm going to give a basic summary of the tools, but I'm really only going to go over the default tools because those are the ones that people use the most. In a future video, maybe a more advanced video, I might go through the other tools as well, but for now I'm just going to go through the default tools in the toolbar. So the Move tool, which is the first one right up here, is used to move layers, which we'll talk about later, selections, and guides within a Photoshop document. The rectangular marquee tool draws rectangular selection outlines such as this one. You can also press and hold Shift as you do this to keep the selection as a square. So let's say that I just wanted to select right here. It's a square because I held down Shift. With the lasso tool, you can do a similar thing as you can with a rectangular marquee tool, except it's freeform. The object selection tool lets you select an object just by dragging a rough selection outline around it. You would use the crop tool in Photoshop to crop an image and remove unwanted areas. So let's say that I wanted to crop this. I would just select the crop tool. These lines would pop up. I would move these around until I got the image that I want, and then I would click Done, and it would crop the image for me. The Frame tool allows you to place images into rectangular or elliptical shapes. The Eyedropper tool samples colors in an image. So if I want to use the color of her pants to create some text up here, I could do that, and you can go around the whole image and basically pick any color that appears in the image. The Spot Healing brush in Photoshop quickly removes blemishes and other minor problem areas in an image. You can alter your brush size here, and you should use a brush size that is only slightly larger than the blemish that you're looking to remove. So if I zoom in, which we haven't gotten to the zoom tool yet, but I would use the zoom tool to zoom in. I got this picture from Pexels.com, which means it was taken by a photographer and probably edited by a photographer, so I would have a difficult time finding a blemish in this image. Let's say that I just wanted to get rid of maybe this shine in the forehead. I would go over it with the Spot Healing brush, and then it would get rid of it for me. The brush tool is Photoshop's primary painting tool right here. With this tool, you can once again change the brush size to whatever you want it to be. To demonstrate, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and then you would just draw on the image. The Clone Stamp tool is the most basic retouching tool. It samples pixels from one area of the image and paints them over pixels in another area. The History brush tool restores parts of an image to an earlier state that you had it before. The Eraser tool obviously erases. So again, I'm going to make the size bigger and I'm just going to erase. The Gradient tool creates a gradual blend between colors, so if I wanted to create a gradient, I can direct the line wherever I want it to be. And then I would just create a gradient. The Blur tool blurs and softens area you paint over with the tool. So again, let's zoom in. I'm going to change the brush size. And let's say I want to soften this texture on the sweater. I'll just go over it with the blur tool. And as you can see, the lines start to get more blurry. With the dodge tool, you can lighten an area of the image. So I'll just show you on her shoe because it's the easiest part. But as you can see, I'm going over it with the dodge tool and it's lightening it. And if you let go and start over again, it'll lighten it more and more and more. The pen tool makes and changes paths or shapes with anchor points and handles. The horizontal type tool, simply known as the type tool as well, allows you to put any text that you want in the document. So I'm going to put that in there. I'm going to use the move tool to move it. And then I'm going to use the eyedropper tool to take the color of her sweater. And then I'm going to go back to the type tool, highlight the text, and then I'll change the color. And now we have some text in the image. And then if you decide that you want to delete it, the text is actually a layer. So you'll go to your layers and you'll right click, delete layer, and then yes. And you no longer have the text in the image. The path selection tool allows you to select and move an entire path at once. The rectangle tool draws rectangular vector shapes, paths, or pixel shapes with sharp or rounded corners. You can press and hold shift as you drag to force the shape into a perfect square. So I will create a rectangle, but I'll also do one where I hold shift and I'll create a square. The hand tool lets us click and drag an image around on the screen to view different areas when zoomed in. So as I've been doing, I'll zoom in and then I'll use the hand tool to drag the image around so that I can see different parts of it as I'm working close up. And then finally, the zoom tool, I think we've figured out at this point, but you'll go up here to the top toolbar and there's a zoom in and a zoom out. You just click on the screen to zoom in and out. And then you'll use the hand tool, which we just learned about, to drag it back to the center so that you can see what you need to see. To learn a little bit more about each of the tools, Photoshop actually provides quick videos on all of the tools if you just hover over it and then click Watch Quick Video. So you can learn more about what vectors and paths are and things like that. And I might actually do another lesson on that in the future. Now I've created a new document and I've put this square and circle in the document. And I'm going to talk about layers now. When I was learning about Photoshop, my professor in college showed me how to use layers by using this example, so I thought that it would be helpful to kind of bring it back. I've created this square and circle, and as you can see, they're overlapping. The circle is over the square. But what if I decide that I want the square to be in front of the circle, actually, or that I don't really like the way that they're placed. I want to move the circle down so that it's overlapping in a different way. So the simple answer is that I can't do that like this. The more complicated answer is that there are ways to do it. I would have to start over completely and do it the way that I'm thinking of doing it now, and that would take a lot of time and effort, and there are a lot of easier ways to do it. So I'm going to get rid of this completely, and I'm going to use the rectangle tool, and I'm completely, and I'm going to use the rectangle tool, and I'm going to pick my color, and I'm going to create another square, except this time it's going to create a layer. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to right click on the rectangle tool and use the ellipse tool. And in this layer, I'm going to create my circle. I'm going to change the fill color on this. You can also change the stroke color. The stroke is just the outline. Usually it defaults to black. I think it defaulted to black on this square too, so I'm going to change it. So now we have these layers, and what we can do is we can take the move tool and we can move them around however we want. So if I wanted it like this, I could have it like this. If I wanted it the way that it was before, I can move it where it was before. I can change the size of it without affecting the square at all. And I can also move the layer and put the square on top of the circle. Or put the circle back on top of the square. Or I can decide I don't like this blue, go back to the tool, change it to green. While you're working with layers, you can also press the I if you want to hide a layer and not focus on it at the moment. It doesn't delete it, it just hides it. It's still there, and then you can open the eye again and it'll show up. You can do that with any of the layers. You can even do that with the background so that it'll be transparent for the moment. You can delete any of the layers that you want by dragging them into the trash can. You can add masks like we did in the double exposure effect. There are a lot of options to what to do with layers, and I can do a more in-depth lesson at some point on how to use layers, but for right now I'm just focusing on the basics, and those are the basics of what you do with layers. Now that I've covered how to create a new document, how to open a pre-existing image, I've gone through a summary of all of the tools that are offered in the toolbar and shown how to get more information, more in-depth information on how to use them, and I've covered the basics of how to use layers. That pretty much wraps up this lesson. In the future, I'll probably do more on the basics of how to use Photoshop, but for now, this gives you a good basis to get into Photoshop and start playing around with the tools and playing with layers and editing your images and things like that. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.